You ever notice how Vader enters a room like he owns the oxygen? He doesn't say a word, doesn't need to, and somehow it's the loudest silence in cinematic history. The man strolls in, chokes a co-worker for underperformance, and people still call him iconic, and I get it. He looks terrifying, sounds like a haunted scuba tank, swings a lightsaber like it owes him money. But here's the twist nobody talks about. He was never the one running the show, because while we were all busy quoting "I am your father" and buying action figures with voice chips, there was an old wrinkly guy in a cloak quietly winning the war. Palpatine didn't need to look scary, he just sat in his chair, smiled like your creepy uncle at Thanksgiving, and dismantled democracy with a polite round of applause. Vader was the muscle, but Palpatine was the one with the map, the plan, and the galaxy on speed dial. And yet somehow, Vader gets all the credit. He's on posters, lunchboxes, t-shirts, and probably 3 different Lego sets right now. Meanwhile, Palpatine gets to sit in the shadows, like a Sith version of middle management. It's frustrating, like watching the drummer get famous, while the songwriter gets evicted. Vader was cool, sure, but he was never the top dog, just the loudest one. What makes it wild is how tragic that actually is. Because Vader could have been the main villain. He had the power, the presence, the mythos, but instead he became someone else's tool, molded by fear, broken by guilt, and stuck playing the role of nightmare enforcer while Palpatine laughed his way into dictatorship. It's like watching a rock star join the wrong band and realize too late that they were just playing backup. And maybe that's what makes Vader so compelling. He wasn't some cartoon bad guy twirling a mustache. He was a fallen hero who never got to climb back up, not until the very end. He didn't choose evil because he wanted power. He did it because he was afraid to lose. And by the time he realized what he'd become, it was too late to undo it. The helmet wasn't just armor, it was punishment, a constant reminder of what he gave up. In this video, we're diving deep into why Vader was never the real villain, and how that was the whole point all along. We'll break down the power dynamics between him and Palpatine, why being second in command made him way more interesting, and how his downfall was never about evil, it was about pain, fear, and control. So if you've ever thought Darth Vader was the ultimate bad guy, you might want to think again. Darth Vader walks into a room and everybody shuts up. The breathing alone feels like a death sentence. He doesn't even run. He just strolls in like he's already written your obituary. And for most of us, that was enough. That was Star Wars evil. Black armor, red lightsaber, force-joking people, mid-meeting. But the more you watch, the more you start to realize Vader might be terrifying, but he's not really in charge. Because hiding behind all that theatrics is someone far more dangerous. Someone who doesn't need a mask, or a cape, or a theme song with 20 French horns. Emperor Palpatine isn't just the guy sitting in a chair whispering evil ideas. He's the one who built the chair, put the mask on Vader, and wrote the theme song himself, metaphorically speaking, of course. What's fascinating is how Star Wars managed to trick us into thinking Vader was the final boss, when really, he was always the sub-boss, the muscle, the blade, not the brain. He gets all the spotlight, but it's Palpatine pulling strings from the shadows, smiling like he knows the ending to a game you didn't even know you were playing. And once you spot that dynamic, everything shifts. You start noticing the little power plays, the way Vader defers, the moments when he's clearly not calling the shots, the Death Star, Palpatine's idea, the Jedi Purge, Palpatine's plan, turning Anakin in the first place. Yep, that was all city. So the real question isn't was Vader the greatest villain? It's why do we think he was? Because the more you dig, the more it becomes clear. Vader wasn't the mind behind the Empire. He was the tool, and that actually makes him way more interesting. And this is where it starts to get a little annoying. Because once you realize Vader was never the mastermind, you also realize how little credit Palpatine actually gets. Vader gets the memes, the merch, the mythos. Meanwhile, Palpatine is out here building an empire from scratch, with 0 thank yous, and a chronic back problem from all that hunched-over whispering. Let's talk logistics. Palpatine didn't just become emperor by yelling unlimited power and calling it a day. He played the Republic like a piano, manufactured a war, convinced an entire galaxy to vote for fascism, and turned the Jedi Order into public enemy number 1, without lifting a single lightsaber. But here's the part that stings, because when you really look at Vader, he's not just a fallen hero, he's a prisoner. Not just of his armor, but of his own guilt, his grief, his failure. Anakin Skywalker wasn't seduced by power. He was manipulated by fear, and once he broke, Palpatine sealed the door behind him. This is a guy who lost everything trying to prevent loss, who turned against his own family to save someone who still died anyway, and then got stuck living with that choice every single day, inside a metal shell designed not just to sustain him, but to remind him that he doesn't get to go back. Even his iconic breathing, The thing that makes him so terrifying is a constant symbol of his suffering. He can't cry, he can't scream. All he can do is breathe and obey. The more power he gains, the less he actually has, because none of it was ever his to begin with. And Palpatine knew that. He didn't just exploit Anakin's emotions. He made sure there was nothing left for him to return to. He burned every bridge, turned every friend into an enemy, and made sure that by the time Vader realized what he'd become, the only path left was forward, deeper into the dark. Vader wasn't born evil. He was sculpted, shattered, and reforged into something he never wanted to be. And what's worse, he believed it was his choice, even when it wasn't. That's not just a villain arc, that's a tragedy. And yet, for all the manipulation, for all the pain, you can't help but be in awe of what Vader became, because even as a pawn, he was the most terrifying pawn in the game. When he walks onto a ship, people die, not because he wants them to, but because that's what he is now. He's pure presence, pure menace. When he enters that hallway in Rogue One and starts tearing through rebel soldiers like tissue paper, you forget about his backstory, his regrets. All you see is the storm, controlled, relentless, untouchable. But it's not just about the action. It's the quiet moments too. The way he stands silently in front of the Emperor. The way he hesitates when Luke says, "I can feel the good in you." The power is there, but so is the conflict. You can almost see the remnants of Anakin flickering behind the mask. Even the way other characters talk about him is filled with this weird reverence, like they're in the presence of something larger than life. He's not just feared, he's mythologized. And that kind of power, that kind of cultural gravity, doesn't happen by accident. Vader is a legend, not because he was the smartest, or the most evil, but because he was the most visible symbol of evil. The one people could point to and say, that's the monster, even if the real monster was smiling in a Senate chair all along. But here's the part that makes Vader truly unforgettable. He didn't stay lost. He wasn't doomed to be a villain forever. He had a chance, one chance, to do something right, and somehow, after everything, he took it. Luke saw something no one else could. Not the mask, not the power, but the man buried underneath it all. And when the moment came, when it was Palpatine or his son, Vader finally chose something for himself. Not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of love. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, it was just one decision, one act of defiance. And suddenly, this towering symbol of terror became something else entirely. A father, a redeemer, a man who finally took control of his own story. And that's what separates Vader from so many other villains. He got out, not because someone saved him, but because someone believed he could be saved. That belief changed everything. Not just for him, but for the galaxy. So maybe being second best wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a lifeline, because while Palpatine ruled the galaxy, Vader still had something left to fight for. And in the end, that was enough. But even after his redemption, there's still something bittersweet about Vader's story, because he didn't get to enjoy the peace he helped bring. He didn't rebuild, didn't lead, didn't even get a real goodbye, just a glance, a smile, and then he was gone. He died not as a hero, celebrated by the galaxy, but as a father remembered by a son. His name still struck fear long after he was gone, because people never knew what really happened. They never saw the choice, only the legacy. And that's the tragedy, because in the end, Vader was never meant to be the villain of Star Wars. He was, its warning, its lesson, a symbol of what happens when fear outweighs faith, when power takes the place of purpose. Palpatine, he was the real villain, the puppet master who never needed a lightsaber, because he had an entire galaxy dancing on his strings. But Vader was the soul of the story, broken, reshaped, and finally reclaimed. So no, he wasn't the greatest villain, and that's exactly what made him great, because his story wasn't about domination. It was about redemption. And that's the one thing Palpatine never understood, or ever could. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please consider looking at my pinned comment and checking out the links for my Amazon storefront. It contains my favorite Legos, my gear in which I make videos, and comics that I read on a daily basis. I update it constantly, so please, take a moment and click on the link. On top of that, check out my second channel, Critical Analysis Hub Plus, and my third channel, Critical Analysis Hub XP. Just one click would go on a long way in supporting my channels and future in YouTube.